The comms were filled with static. Wind howled like a monster tearing the sky apart. On a remote, jagged coastline, 12 Navy SEALs were pinned down, their ammunition running low, their extraction helicopter lying in twisted ruin at the base of a cliff. The mission had gone sideways, ambushed by insurgents just as the tropical storm rolled in. Water pounded the rocks like war drums. Lightning flashed, exposing enemy silhouettes creeping closer through the rain. Every man in the team knew the truth. No bird could fly in weather like this. The commander's voice cracked through the headset, ragged and defeated. Mayday. We are out of options, silence answered him. For the first time, the legendary SEALs felt abandoned. They braced for their last stand, knowing their sacrifice might buy only minutes. Then, faint at first, a new sound threaded through the storm, the distant womp-womp of rotor blades. It grew louder, closer, until even the roar of the wind couldn't drown it out. The men froze. Their eyes turned upward. Through a rip in the storm clouds, a lone Black Hawk tore into view. Lightning silhouetted it like an avenging phantom. It wasn't their scheduled pilot. This was someone who had no business flying in this weather. It was her. Captain Elena Torres had never been one to obey limits. A combat pilot with a reputation for reckless courage, she had overheard the Mayday call while grounded at a nearby base. Ground crew had begged her not to go. The storm was suicide, visibility zero, instruments unreliable. Command had already written the SEALs off, but she had simply strapped herself in, muttering, "If they're alive enough to call Mayday, then I'm alive enough to reach them." Now, as her Black Hawk fought the crosswinds, she gritted her teeth, hands locked on the cyclic. Lightning blinded her. Rain hammered her canopy. She flew lower, skimming the angry sea, trusting instinct where her instruments failed. The SEALs below could scarcely believe it. "She's actually here," one whispered. Enemy fire erupted. Tracers streaked the night sky, trying to swat her out of the storm. Torres banked hard, pulling a maneuver no one dared in combat weather, hovering sideways against the cliff face, tail rotor kicking water into mist. She dropped the fast ropes, her voice breaking through the static. "Get on board." "You've got 90 seconds. The SEALs scrambled. Muddy boots slipped on wet rock as they clipped in and climbed, rifles slung across their backs. Every second felt stolen from death. The commander was last, pausing only to fire a burst at the advancing enemy before he leapt onto the rope. Mortar rounds lit up the shoreline. One exploded so close the shockwave rocked the Black Hawk, alarms blaring in the cockpit. Torres wrestled the controls, refusing to let the bird spin. Sweat stung her eyes, but her voice stayed calm. "Hold on. We're not done yet." With all 12 aboard, she yanked the Black Hawk up and out, climbing through sheets of rain. Enemy fire peppered the fuselage. Another mortar struck the beach where the team had stood seconds before, erasing any doubt. Had she not come, they would be dead. The Black Hawk roared into the night, swallowed by storm clouds but carrying life where there should have been none. Hours later, back at base, soaked and bruised, the SEAL commander confronted her. "You ignored direct orders," he said. Torres simply wiped rain from her face and replied, "So did you, when you called Mayday." The men who had faced death on that cliff never forgot the sight of her helicopter breaking through the storm. Among themselves, they would later say, "That night death came with the storm. But so did she." The coastline was nothing but jagged teeth of rock, battered endlessly by the sea. Even on clear days, it was a place no one wanted to linger, too exposed, too remote, too unforgiving. But tonight the ocean had turned violent, whipped into a frenzy by a tropical storm that should have grounded all military operations. Yet 12 Navy SEALs were there, deep behind enemy lines, their mission already completed but their way home destroyed. Hours earlier, under cover of darkness, they had inserted onto the coast to sabotage a weapons cache hidden inside a cliffside bunker. The demolition had gone as planned. Charges placed, bunker reduced to rubble, enemy supply line crippled. But the retreat had spiraled into chaos. As they withdrew to their extraction point, insurgents swarmed the cliffs, alerted by the explosions. Gunfire cracked through the storm. The SEALs fought back, disciplined and precise, but they were outnumbered and pinned down. The last shred of hope, awaiting Black Hawk, had lifted into the gale, straining to hover. Then, with a flash of lightning and a sickening crunch, it lost control. The men watched in horror as their bird spiraled, smashed into the rocks, and erupted into flames. The storm had claimed it before it could claim them. Now they were stranded. Wind howled like a living thing, tearing at their gear, shoving saltwater spray into their eyes. The rain came in sideways sheets, reducing vision to a blur. The cliff gave them little shelter. Every flash of lightning exposed their position. Worse, enemy fighters were regrouping, pressing in from the jungle above. The commander, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, crouched behind a boulder, soaked to the bone, radio clenched in his hand. His men looked to him, their trust unshaken, but Hale knew the odds. Ammunition was low. Reinforcements were hours away. And no pilot in their right mind would fly into weather like this. He tried anyway. "Overlord, this is Viper Team," Hale shouted over the static, the storm nearly drowning his words. "Extraction bird is down. We are pinned. Repeat, pinned at grid 43 by 62. Request immediate evac." "How copy?" Only Crackling answered. He adjusted the antenna, banged the handset, tried again. Finally, a reply broke through, distorted and thin. "Viper Team. Storm has grounded all aircraft. Sit tight, repeat. No bird can reach you." Hale's jaw clenched. Sit tight? With the enemy closing in and cliffs at their backs, sitting tight meant dying on foreign rock, their bodies swallowed by the storm. One of the younger operators, Ramirez, muttered, "Sir." "What now?" Hale looked at his men, faces streaked with rain, eyes hard but not hopeless. They were SEALs. They had fought through worse, but never against nature itself. He exhaled, pressing the radio again. "Overlord, this is Viper Team. Mayday. I say again, Mayday. We are out of options." The words hung heavy in the air, swallowed by static. It wasn't a phrase men like Hale spoke lightly. SEALs weren't trained to cry for help. They were trained to be the help. But tonight, even they were human. For a long moment, there was nothing but the storm's roar, enemy shouts drifting closer, and the metallic click-clack of rifles being checked. The team tightened their perimeter, preparing for the inevitable. Rain dripped off their helmets. Boots shifted in mud. Fingers curled around triggers. If no bird came, they would sell their lives dearly. But deep inside, though no one dared to admit it, every man silently prayed that somehow, against all odds, the Mayday would be heard. At Forward Operating Base Kestrel, the storm had already grounded every aircraft. Hangar doors rattled against hurricane winds, rain hammered tin roofs, and even the most seasoned pilots had resigned themselves to waiting it out. No one argued with the sky when it turned into a monster. Inside the operations center, radios hissed and crackled. Staff officers hunched over consoles, struggling to hold comms with the scattered teams still deployed. When the Mayday call from Viper Team came through, the room went silent. "Negative on extraction," the air controller said into his headset, eyes heavy. "No bird can fly in that soup." "Repeat, no bird." In the corner, a figure leaned against the wall, arms crossed, dark eyes fixed on the comms chatter. Her name was Captain Elena Torres, Black Hawk pilot, 32 years old, with 6 deployments behind her and a reputation that both inspired and unsettled her peers. She wasn't the biggest, nor the loudest in the squadron, but she was the one who never flinched. The one who flew nap of the earth at night with her rotors nearly clipping treetops. The one who had earned the call sign Phoenix after returning a shredded helicopter to base with both engines bleeding oil. To some, she was reckless. To others, fearless. To Torres, it was simple. If someone needed her, she flew. Now she listened as Viper Team's transmission faded into static. 12 SEALs stranded. Storm closing in. Enemy forces pressing. Command already washing their hands. Her jaw tightened. She knew those men. Had ferried them on insertions before, felt their boots thump on her bird's deck. She remembered the way they always gave her a nod, as if acknowledging that their lives rested in her hands as much as their rifles. She pushed off the wall and strode to the operations table. "What's their grid?" The controller glanced up, surprised. "Doesn't matter. No one's flying in this." "Not tonight," Torres didn't answer. She pulled a folded map from the edge of the table, spread it flat, and traced her finger along the coastline. Her mind was already calculating wind direction, wave height, terrain. Dangerous, yes. Impossible? Not to her. A major stepped in front of her. "Don't even think about it, Captain. Orders are clear. All aircraft grounded until the storm passes." Torres met his gaze steadily. "Orders are easy when it's not your team dying out there." The room went still. No one challenged her directly, but the message was clear. If she lifted off, she'd be on her own. No escort, no backup, no clearance. That was fine. She had flown alone before. Minutes later, in the hangar, ground crew watched in disbelief as Torres climbed into her Black Hawk. The storm shrieked outside, a wall of black rain and white fury. One mechanic shouted over the roar, "Ma'am, the winds will tear you apart. You won't make it 5 clicks." She adjusted her helmet, voice calm. "Then I'll make it 6. The engines roared to life, blades beginning their thunderous spin. Rain lashed across the windshield as if trying to force her back. But Torres's hands were steady on the controls, her eyes unblinking. As the massive hangar doors groaned open, lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the drenched figures of the crew staring after her. Most thought they'd never see her alive again. But as the Black Hawk lifted, skids leaving the ground, Elena Torres wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about 12 men on a cliff, soaked and bleeding, who had placed their faith in the impossible. She intended to deliver it. The storm swallowed the Black Hawk the moment it cleared the hangar. 1 second, Torres had the faint glow of runway lights. The next, nothing but black chaos. Rain slammed against the windshield like bullets, wipers screeching in futility. Lightning flashed so bright it seared her vision, followed instantly by thunder that rattled her chest. Crosswinds clawed at the helicopter, forcing her to fight the cyclic with both hands. Muscles straining against the machine's will to roll and flip. She flew low, skimming the turbulent waves because higher meant stronger winds. But low came with its own death sentence. Rogue swells rising like walls, threatening to smash her bird into the ocean. She adjusted altitude constantly, heart pounding, eyes darting between the altimeter and the angry water below. The co-pilot's seat beside her was empty. She had no one to split the workload, no second set of eyes to call out warnings. It was just her instincts, her training, and the storm that wanted to tear her apart. Through the headset, all she could hear was static mixed with the faint, desperate fragments of Viper Team's comms. Bursts of gunfire bled into the channel, then silence, then a clipped voice shouting over the wind. "Running low! Contact close! Repeat, close!" She clenched her jaw. They were still alive. Still fighting? That was enough. On the ground, the SEALs clung to life on the cliffs. Rain turned dirt into slick mud, making movement treacherous. They shifted from rock to rock, engaging shadowy figures pressing in from the jungle. The storm gave the enemy cover, but it gave the SEALs no relief. "Ammo check!" Hale barked, firing 2 controlled bursts into the darkness. "3 mags!" Ramirez shouted back. "2 left!" Another answered. It wasn't enough. The enemy knew it too. Gunfire grew bolder, closer, as if their attackers sensed the SEALs' desperation. One insurgent lobbed a grenade, the explosion kicking up a geyser of mud and water. Shrapnel peppered Hale's shoulder, but he stayed upright, gritting his teeth. If rescue didn't come soon, they would be overrun. Back in the cockpit, Torres flew blind through curtains of rain. Instruments flickered, warning lights blinking like angry eyes. Wind shear nearly flipped her bird, alarms screaming, but she corrected by instinct, coaxing the Black Hawk into compliance. Her breathing slowed. Fear became background noise. She remembered the men she'd ferried on countless missions, the way they trusted her with silent nods, never doubting she would deliver them. She owed them that trust back. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the coastline ahead, jagged cliffs clawing into the sea. Somewhere out there, 12 men were waiting. "Viper Team, this is Phoenix," she said into her mic, voice steady despite the storm. "Hold your ground." "I'm coming in!" For a heartbeat, only static replied. Then Hale's voice broke through, disbelief laced with relief. "Phoenix? Negative, you can't fly this storm." "You'll never, I'm already here," she cut in. On the cliff, the SEALs exchanged looks of shock. Ramirez's lips curled into the first smile he'd managed all night. "Damn. She's crazy." "Crazy enough to save us," Hale muttered. The Black Hawk clawed its way along the coast, every gust threatening to slam it into the rocks. Torres scanned the shoreline, searching for the faint strobe marker the SEALs would have planted. Visibility was near zero, nothing but sheets of water and lightning flashes. Then, through the chaos, she spotted it. A faint, blinking light on the cliff edge, almost swallowed by the storm. Her grip tightened on the controls. "Got you." She angled the Black Hawk toward it, bracing herself. Getting here had been hell. Getting them out would be worse. On the cliffside, the SEALs huddled behind slick boulders, rifles raised against shapes moving in the dark. Lightning flashed, illuminating the jungle above them. Dozens of enemy fighters closing in. "Last mag," Ramirez muttered, slapping it into his rifle. Hale nodded grimly. Make every round count. They had fought through impossible odds before, but this was different. It wasn't just men and bullets now. It was the storm itself fighting against them. The sea at their backs, enemies to the front, ammunition dwindling with each passing second. The truth was unspoken but heavy. There would be no more reinforcements, no miracle escape, or so they thought. Hale peeked over the rock, scanning the black horizon. At first, all he saw was chaos. Waves crashing against stone, rain shredding sideways, lightning tearing the sky. Then buried beneath the storm's roar came a sound that froze him. Whump. Hump! Hump! The rhythmic thrum grew louder, cutting through the storm like a heartbeat. Wait, Hale whispered. Do you hear that? The others strained, squinting through the sheets of rain, and then they saw it. A massive silhouette breaking through the storm clouds, blades hammering against the gale. Lightning forked across the sky, outlining its shape in silver fire. A lone black hawk, flying where no machine had any right to be. One of the SEALs exhaled, awestruck. No way. Another laughed, half-crazed with relief. She actually came. The enemy froze too, their advance faltering as the ghostly aircraft emerged from the heavens. For a moment, everyone, SEALs and insurgents alike, stared in disbelief at the sight of a warbird defying the storm. The Black Hawk roared lower, skimming the cliff edge, rain exploding in its downdraft. The side doors opened, ropes uncoiled, and Captain Elena Torres' voice crackled through their comms. Viper team, your ride is here. 90 seconds, move. Hale's chest tightened. He had heard her voice before, calm and professional on insertions, but never like this, fierce, commanding, unstoppable. The SEALs surged into action. Ramirez fired one last burst to cover the team, then slung his rifle and grabbed the rope. Boots slipped on wet stone, hands burned as they climbed, but adrenaline carried them. One by one, the men rose from the cliff toward salvation. The enemy snapped from their shock and unleashed fire. Tracer rounds lit up the rain, red streaks clawing for the helicopter. Bullets sparked off rock and tore into mud, one grazing Ramirez's shoulder. He gritted his teeth and kept climbing. Torres held the Black Hawk steady, rain hammering the canopy, alarms wailing as wind buffeted her. She hovered against the cliff with impossible precision, refusing to drift even an inch despite the storm's fury. Come on, she muttered, glancing at the ropes in her side mirror. She could see dark figures climbing, silhouetted by lightning. Her pulse matched the pounding rotors. Hale was last. He covered his men with short, sharp bursts, then slung his rifle and seized the rope. A mortar exploded nearby, showering him with mud. For a heartbeat, the cliff was nothing but fire and smoke. The Black Hawk lurched under the shockwave, alarms screaming. Torres fought the controls, teeth bared, refusing to let the bird drift into the rocks. Not tonight, she hissed. Not on my watch. Hale climbed fast, boots slipping, arms burning. As he reached the door, Ramirez grabbed his vest and hauled him inside. All aboard, Ramirez shouted. Copy, Torres replied, yanking the cyclic. The Black Hawk surged upward, rotors clawing the storm as gunfire chased them. Another mortar obliterated the cliff they had just abandoned, sending rocks crashing into the sea. The SEALs, sprawled on the deck, stared at each other in stunned silence. Every single man was alive. Against reason, against orders, against the storm itself, they had been lifted from death's edge. In that moment, one truth settled over them all. She hadn't just come for them. She had dared the impossible to pull them out. The Black Hawk clawed skyward, its rotors chopping through the storm with raw defiance. For the first time that night, the SEALs dared to breathe, but their relief was short-lived. Tracer fire streaked upward from the jungle, carving red arcs through the sheets of rain. Heavy-caliber rounds slammed into the fuselage with metallic thuds, one tearing straight through a panel and sparking against the deck. The bird shuddered violently. Taking fire! Multiple positions! Ramirez shouted, gripping the mounted door gun. Hale grabbed his shoulder. Lay it down! Ramirez swung the gun out and unleashed a storm of his own, muzzle flashing, brass raining down. The gunfire thundered in the confined space, drowning out even the howling wind. Other SEALs joined in, leaning from the doors, their rifles barking into the night. But for every tracer they fired back, 3 more lanced up from below. In the cockpit, Torres was locked in a brutal wrestling match with the Black Hawk. Crosswinds slammed her from the left, then from the right, buffeting the rotor disc so hard the helicopter lurched like a drunk. Warning lights flared across her console. Hydraulic pressure low, engine strain critical. "Come on, baby. Hold together," she whispered, coaxing the machine like a living thing. Through the canopy, she spotted the flash of enemy mortar tubes being set up along the ridgeline. Her blood ran cold. Mortars could swat her out of the sky in seconds. "Viper team," she called back, voice steady despite the chaos. "We've got incoming. Hold tight." The first mortar launched, an orange streak arcing high into the black clouds. "Brace!" Hale bellowed. The round exploded close, a fireball lighting the storm, shockwaves slamming into the helicopter. The Black Hawk dropped 20 feet, alarms shrieking. Men inside grabbed straps, teeth rattling as the bird bucked like a wild beast. Torres fought the controls, forcing the nose down. "Not today," she growled, pushing the helicopter into a gut-wrenching dive that skimmed just above the raging sea. Salt spray blasted against the hull, but the sudden drop threw off the enemy's aim. The next mortar whistled harmlessly into the cliffs above. "Nice flying," Ramirez yelled, voice ragged with adrenaline. Torres didn't answer. She didn't have breath to spare. The jungle below erupted in muzzle flashes as insurgents pursued them along the coast. Heavy machine guns tracked the helicopter, chewing into the night sky. The Black Hawk jolted as rounds struck the tail. "Tail rotor hit," one SEAL shouted, Torres' heart hammered. If the tail rotor failed, the bird would spin out of control. She countered with delicate pedal inputs, praying the damage wasn't catastrophic. The helicopter trembled, but it held. "Returning fire!" Hale barked. He and two others poured rounds down onto the ridgeline, suppressing the gunners. One enemy position went silent, then another. But more kept coming, chasing them like shadows. Torres knew they couldn't outrun both the storm and the enemy at low altitude. They needed a break. Her eyes locked on the waves ahead, towering white-capped monsters that rose and fell like moving mountains. She made a decision that would either save them or kill them all. She pushed the collective and banked hard, skimming dangerously close to the water. The helicopter's skids practically kissed the wave tops, spray exploding against the fuselage. "Are you insane?" Ramirez yelled. "Insane keeps us alive," Torres shot back. The waves swallowed them, hiding the Black Hawk from the ridgeline. Enemy tracers fizzed out into the sea, losing their target. The men held their breath as Torres weaved between swells, flying lower than anyone dared. For a terrifying minute, it was only storm, ocean, and the deafening roar of rotors. Then slowly, the gunfire faded behind them. Inside the cabin, the SEALs slumped against the walls, soaked, bruised, but alive. Hale met Torres' eyes in the mirror mounted above her console. He gave a single nod, not just of thanks, but of respect. They weren't safe yet, but they were through the worst. The storm still raged. The Black Hawk groaned with every gust, but death's grip had loosened. Torres tightened her hands on the controls. "Hang on, boys. We're not home yet." The Black Hawk limped through the storm, battered but unbroken. Every joint creaked, every alarm light glowed like a warning of imminent failure, yet the bird held together under Torres' grip. The coastline receded behind them, swallowed by darkness and rain. Ahead, faint through the sheets of water, shimmered the distant glow of the forward operating base. Inside the cabin, the SEALs were silent. Not because they weren't grateful, but because exhaustion had drained every word from them. Mud streaked their gear, blood mixed with rain on their faces, eyes red from smoke and strain. They were men who had accepted death an hour ago, now breathing, alive, because someone had dared to defy orders and logic alike. Hale leaned against the bulkhead, watching Torres' silhouette through the cockpit doorway. He thought of the words he'd spoken earlier. Mayday. We are out of options. He had meant it. He had believed it. Yet the impossible had arrived anyway, flying through the storm with the stubbornness of a soul who refused to let go. As the Black Hawk flared for landing, base personnel ran into the rain, guiding it in with glowing wands. The bird settled heavily onto the pad, skids clanging against steel. Engines whined down, rotors slicing slower and slower until the storm's roar was the only sound again. The cabin doors slid open. The SEALs spilled out into the rain, boots slapping the metal deck. Medics rushed forward, checking wounds, ushering them toward cover. But none of them moved far until Hale turned back. Torres was climbing out of the cockpit, helmet tucked under one arm, her hair plastered to her face by rain. She looked like she'd just wrestled a hurricane, and won. Hale strode toward her. Captain Torres. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between fatigue and defiance. She half expected a reprimand, maybe even arrest. After all, she had disobeyed direct orders. She had taken a multi-million-dollar aircraft into conditions that would have shredded lesser pilots. You ignored orders, Hale said flatly. Torres held his gaze. Her voice was steady, almost calm. So did you, when you called Mayday. For a moment, the storm seemed to hush between them. Then slowly, a smile tugged at the corner of Hale's mouth. He extended his hand. On behalf of my men, thank you. She shook it firmly. No bravado, no dramatics. Just did my job. But the SEALs standing nearby knew better. This wasn't just a job. It was courage that had no equal. In the days that followed, the mission reports circulated through command. Official language tried to bury the chaos under sterile terms. Enemy contact sustained, aircraft damage noted, extraction successful. But among those who had been there, another story spread. They spoke of the night the sea and sky became monsters. Of the moment their radios went silent after the word Mayday. And of the phantom that appeared in lightning and rain, a lone Black Hawk flown by a pilot too stubborn to let them die. Torres returned to her duties without ceremony. She didn't crave recognition, and command was reluctant to commend someone who had broken protocol. Yet in quiet corners of bases and briefing rooms, whispers followed her name. One SEAL put it best, weeks later, when asked how they had survived. He didn't mention the gunfights, or the storm, or even their own grit. He simply said, death came with the storm that night. But so did she. The men of Viper Team carried that memory forever. In after-action reports, in reunions years later, in stories told to their children, her name was always there, because heroes don't always wear tridents on their chests. Sometimes, they wear a pilot's wings, and sometimes, when all hope is gone, they arrive with rotor blades beating against the storm.